The room was silent when my brother started smiling. Not a nervous smile. Not the kind people give when they don't know what to say. It was the smile of a man who believed he'd just won. Across the long mahogany table, the lawyer continued reading our father's will. The family residence. My brother leaned back in his chair. The majority ownership of Parker and Sons. His smile grew wider. The investment accounts, vehicles, and remaining personal assets. My mother lowered her eyes. I sat completely still. My brother looked at me as if he expected me to congratulate him. Then the lawyer stopped. He slowly closed the folder. My brother frowned. Is that it? The lawyer looked directly at him. No. My brother's smile disappeared. There is one more beneficiary. Nobody moved. My mother's hand froze over her purse, and I felt my heart begin to pound, because there was something my father had never told any of us. Something that would make my brother realize that he hadn't inherited everything after all. And the strangest part? I wouldn't learn the truth until that exact moment. My name is Emily Parker. I'm 37 years old. And for most of my life I had learned one simple lesson. If I wanted something, I couldn't wait for someone else to give it to me. I had grown up in a comfortable family. We weren't rich when I was a child, but we weren't struggling either. My father, Richard Parker, owned a small construction company that he had built from nothing. My mother, Diane, managed the house and helped with the bookkeeping. And then there was my younger brother, Jason. Jason was 4 years younger than me. He was charming, funny, confident, and according to my mother, destined for greatness. I never understood exactly what that greatness was supposed to be, because while I was studying, working part-time, and saving every dollar I earned, Jason seemed to move through life without worrying about consequences. If he wanted a new car, Dad helped him. If he lost a job, Mom told him it wasn't his fault. If he made a bad investment, Dad quietly covered the loss. And whenever I questioned it, my mother would say the same thing. Emily, your brother just needs a little more support. I eventually stopped asking questions. I learned to keep my opinions to myself. After college, I moved into a small apartment and started working for an accounting firm. I wasn't making much money, but I was independent. I paid my own bills. I bought my own car. And eventually, after years of saving, I bought a modest house. It wasn't impressive. There was no huge driveway, no swimming pool, no luxury kitchen, but it was mine. Every payment had come from my paycheck. Every piece of furniture had been purchased with money I had earned, and I loved it. My father used to visit sometimes. He would stand on the porch, look around, and smile. "You've done well, Em." Those words always meant more to me than he probably realized, because my father wasn't a man who gave compliments easily, especially to me. With Jason, everything was different. Jason joined Dad's company after college. Within 3 years, Dad had made him a manager. Within 5, Jason was running major projects. He drove a company vehicle. He had an office. And everyone assumed he would eventually inherit the business. I never complained. I had my own career. I didn't need Dad's company. At least that's what I told myself. But there was one thing I secretly wanted. My father's approval. And for years I wondered whether I'd ever truly have it. When Dad turned 65, he started talking about retirement. At family dinners, he would sometimes say, "I'm not going to be around forever." Jason would laugh. "Dad, stop talking like you're 80. Dad would smile. But I noticed something different in his eyes. He was thinking about the future. One evening after dinner, I stayed behind to help Mom clean the kitchen. Dad walked past us and stopped. "Emily." I turned around. "Yeah. Can I talk to you outside?" I followed him onto the porch. It was cold. The street was quiet. Dad put his hands into his coat pockets. "I've been thinking about the company." "About retiring?" He nodded. "I want you to know something." "What?" He looked at me for a long moment. "You've always been the responsible one." I laughed awkwardly. "That's not exactly news." He smiled. Then his expression became serious. "Sometimes being responsible means people expect you to sacrifice more than everyone else." I didn't understand what he meant. "Dad, is something wrong?" "No." He shook his head. "Just remember something. Don't let anyone convince you that being a good daughter means giving up everything you've worked for. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? He looked toward the dark backyard. I just wanted you to hear it from me. That conversation stayed with me. I didn't know why, but it did. 6 months later, Dad died. It happened suddenly. One morning, Mom called me while I was driving to work. Her voice was shaking. Emily. I pulled the car over. What happened? Your father is in the hospital. I drove there as fast as I could, but by the time I arrived, it was too late. Dad was gone. I remember standing outside that hospital room and feeling like the entire world had become strangely quiet. Jason arrived 20 minutes later. He cried. Mom collapsed into his arms, and I stood there, unable to process what had happened. My father was gone. The man whose approval I had spent years trying to earn was suddenly someone I could never speak to again. The funeral was difficult. Afterward, relatives came and went. People brought food. They told stories. They hugged us. But beneath all of it was an uncomfortable question. What would happen to Dad's estate? Nobody asked it directly. Not yet. But everyone was thinking about it, including Jason. 3 weeks after the funeral, we received a letter from Dad's attorney. There would be a formal reading of the will. My mother and I arrived together. Jason was already there. He was wearing an expensive suit. He looked confident, almost too confident. I sat across from him. He leaned toward me. You okay? I'm fine. He smiled. Dad always wanted the company to stay in the family. I nodded. I know. He told me that many times. Something about the way he said it bothered me, but I ignored it. The attorney, Mr. Harris, entered the room carrying a thick black folder. He had been Dad's lawyer for nearly 25 years. We all stood. He shook our hands. Then we sat. He adjusted his glasses. Before I begin, I want everyone to understand that this document was finalized approximately 18 months ago. Jason frowned. 18 months? Yes. Did Dad make any changes after that? Mr. Harris paused. There was an amendment. Jason leaned forward. What kind of amendment? We'll get to that. Jason leaned back. I noticed his expression change. For the first time, he looked nervous. Mr. Harris began reading. My wife, Diane Parker, shall receive. My mother closed her eyes. The primary family savings account and the residence where she currently lives. Mom quietly nodded. Then came Jason's name. Jason Parker shall receive. The list seemed endless. The company. The commercial property. Several investment accounts. Dad's classic car. The vacation property. A large portion of his personal assets. Jason's eyes widened. He looked at me. Then he smiled. It was that same smile. The smile of someone who had just won. I tried not to react. Then Mr. Harris continued. Emily Parker shall receive. I waited. He paused. A personal letter. Jason looked at me. His smile almost became a laugh. I felt my stomach tighten. A letter? That was it? After everything? I looked at Mom. She looked shocked too. Mr. Harris continued reading the document, but I barely heard him. My mind was racing. Had Dad really done this? Had he truly left almost everything to Jason? I remembered the porch conversation. Don't let anyone convince you that being a good daughter means giving up everything you've worked for. What had he meant? When the reading appeared to be finished, Jason leaned back. He exhaled. So that's it. Mr. Harris looked at him. Not quite. Jason frowned. The lawyer slowly closed the folder. Then he placed both hands on the table. There is one more beneficiary. The room went silent. Jason sat upright. What? Mr. Harris repeated himself. One more beneficiary. My mother whispered. Who? The lawyer looked at me. Then he said my name. Emily Parker. I stared at him. What? Jason's face changed immediately. But she was already mentioned. Mr. Harris nodded. She was. Then what are you talking about? The letter wasn't her inheritance. Jason looked confused. The letter was attached to the amendment. My heart started beating faster. What amendment? Mr. Harris opened another folder. Dad's handwriting appeared on the first page. I recognized it immediately. The lawyer began reading. 18 months ago, I realized that my children had different ideas about what it meant to inherit. Jason's jaw tightened. Mr. Harris continued. I also realized that if I divided my assets equally, I might create more conflict rather than less. Jason interrupted. So what did he do? Mr. Harris ignored him. He continued reading. I have therefore created a separate trust. Jason stared at the lawyer. What trust? Mr. Harris turned toward me. One that names Emily Parker as the primary beneficiary. Jason stood up. That isn't possible. Please sit down. No. Dad promised me the company. He did. Then how can she be the beneficiary? Because the trust does not replace the assets you've received. Jason looked confused. It adds something else. The lawyer slid a document across the table. I looked at it. My name was written across. What is this? Mr. Harris smiled sadly. Your father purchased a property 5 years ago. I frowned. What property? Your childhood home. I stared at him. My parents had sold that house years earlier. At least that's what I thought. Mr. Harris continued. Your father bought it back privately. My mother covered her mouth. I didn't know that. He kept it in a separate holding company. Jason shook his head. Why? The lawyer looked at me. Because your father wanted you to have it. I couldn't speak. Mr. Harris continued. The property has been fully paid off. My eyes filled with tears. Why didn't he tell me? Mr. Harris looked down at the document. Because he knew you would refuse to accept it. That sounded exactly like me. I wiped my eyes. Jason slammed his hand onto the table. This is ridiculous. The lawyer remained calm. Jason, your father left you the company and the majority of his financial assets. But she gets the house? The property is worth approximately $800,000. Jason froze. $800,000? Mr. Harris nodded. And there is more. Jason slowly sat back down. What more? The lawyer opened another page. Your father also transferred ownership of the family company's charitable foundation to Emily. Jason stared at me. You've got to be kidding. I shook my head. I didn't know. The lawyer nodded. She didn't. Jason looked furious. You knew he favored you. No. You always acted like you were better than me. No, Jason. I looked directly at him. I spent my whole life thinking you were the one Dad preferred. The room became silent. Because suddenly, neither of us knew what to say. After the meeting, Jason followed me into the parking lot. Emily. I turned around. What? He looked angry. You knew about the trust. I didn't. You expect me to believe that? Yes. He laughed bitterly. Dad always treated you like the responsible one. I shook my head. Because I was. That doesn't mean you deserved more. I didn't ask for more. He stopped. I continued. You received the company. You received the investments. You received the properties. You received most of Dad's money. And I received a house he secretly bought because it meant something to him. Jason looked away. Then he said something I'll never forget. You always get what you want. I stared at him. No, Jason. I took a breath. I got what Dad wanted me to have. Then I walked away. 2 days later, Mr. Harris called me. There is one more thing. I laughed. Another surprise? Something like that. He asked me to come to his office. When I arrived, he handed me an envelope. This was written by your father. I opened it. The first line made me cry. Emily, if you're reading this, I'm probably no longer there to explain myself. I continued. I know you may feel confused by the decisions I've made. I know you may wonder why I didn't simply tell you. But I needed to see whether my children could live without comparing what one received to what the other received. I stopped reading. Mr. Harris looked away to give me privacy. I continued. Jason has always believed that inheritance is about possessions. But you have always understood that inheritance is about responsibility. My hands were shaking. Dad continued. The house I bought back isn't simply a house. It is where you learned to walk. Where you slept when you were sick. Where I carried you downstairs on Christmas morning. And where I watched both of my children grow. I closed my eyes. I remembered that house. The old staircase, the kitchen window, the tree in the backyard, the bedroom where I used to read. Dad had remembered all of it. Then I reached the final paragraph. I hope one day Jason understands that I didn't give him less because I loved him less. I gave him responsibility because he needs to learn how to carry it. And I gave you the home because you already learned how to protect one. I couldn't hold back my tears. Mr. Harris quietly handed me a tissue. For several months things were difficult. Jason struggled with the company. Dad had given him control, but control was different from ownership. Employees questioned his decisions. Several senior managers threatened to resign. For the first time, Jason couldn't call Dad and ask him to fix everything. Eventually, he had to face something he'd avoided his entire life. He had to become responsible. Meanwhile, I visited the old family house. It had been empty for years. Dust covered the furniture. The walls still carried small marks from our childhood. I walked into my old bedroom. There was still a tiny scratch on the door from when Jason and I had fought over who got the bigger room. I smiled. Then I cried. Because Dad hadn't given me a mansion. He had given me a memory. A piece of our family that money couldn't replace. 6 months later, Jason called me. Can we talk? Sure. We met at a coffee shop. He looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. He looked tired. But calmer. I owe you an apology. I didn't say anything. He continued. I thought Dad was choosing you over me. He wasn't. I know that now. He looked down. I spent my entire life believing I deserved whatever I wanted, because Dad always rescued me. I nodded. That wasn't your fault. It became my fault when I kept expecting it. I smiled slightly. He looked at me. You know what the worst part is? What? I inherited the company. I laughed. That's the worst part? No. He smiled. The worst part is that Dad gave me exactly what I thought I wanted. He paused. And it forced me to become the person I should have been years ago. I didn't know what to say. Then he reached across the table. I'm proud of you. Those words surprised me. Thank you. And I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you had to compete with me. I took a breath. I forgive you. He smiled. But I raised an eyebrow. You still have to earn your own respect. He laughed. Fair enough. A year after Dad's death, I moved into the old family house. I didn't sell my own home. Instead, I rented it to a young couple who had just started a family. The old house became something different. Not a monument to Dad. Not a symbol of inheritance. A home. I painted the walls. Repaired the porch. Planted flowers in the backyard. And one Saturday afternoon Jason came over. He stood on the porch. You changed it. A little. He smiled. It looks good. We stood there quietly. Then he looked at me. Dad would like this. I smiled. I think so. That evening we sat outside as the sun went down. For the first time in years neither of us talked about money. Neither of us talked about inheritance. Neither of us wondered who Dad loved more. Because we finally understood something. Inheritance isn't always about who receives the biggest bank account. Sometimes a parent leaves behind something far more valuable. A lesson. A responsibility. A second chance. And sometimes the person who appears to have inherited everything is actually the person who has been given the hardest test. My brother thought he had won the inheritance. He thought the company, the money, and the properties meant Dad had chosen him. But the lawyer's final words changed everything. There is one more beneficiary. And that beneficiary wasn't simply me. It was the person Dad believed I could become. Someone who could receive something valuable without believing it made her more valuable than anyone else. Someone who could forgive without forgetting. Someone who could love her family without surrendering her boundaries. And that was the greatest inheritance my father ever left me. Not the house. Not the trust. Not the money. But the understanding that being loved doesn't always mean being given more. Sometimes love means being trusted with something you are strong enough to carry. And sometimes the greatest surprise in an inheritance isn't what you receive. It's finally